As we go through life, there is one thing that so many of us try so hard to avoid: the inevitable fear. But there are those few brave souls that seek only this fear, like those of you who clicked this video. For that, I thank you, but by the end, you won't be thanking me. So lock your doors, bar your windows, turn out the lights, and prepare for Casey's Corner Update, Coffee and Cigarettes by The Shadow. Now relax. This won't hurt too much.
As I near the end of my life, I look back on all the good times I've had and try and forget about the bad. There's one bad thing I can't overlook, though. The period of the best and worst of my life, in the years from 1986 to 1988. I feel that I need to get the whole story out there so I can die without anything weighing on my conscience.
That is a brief excerpt from the interview I did with the notorious Casey Weber following his arrest in 2012. There is much more, and we will bring that to you right after these messages. This is Private Eyes with Donna Talbot. Welcome back. I had an opportunity to speak with one of the most famous death row inmates in the history of Prince George, and I'm sure you are all familiar with Casey Weber's past. Starting out after college writing for TV5 local television in 1979, the world seemed to be his oyster. In 1982, he began writing for the popular show, The Littlest Hobo, and continued to do so until the show's eventual failure in January 1985. Looking back at all of this, I wanted to ask Casey what his feeling was on the loss of his job at that time. Here's the clip. So, Mr. Weber, what was it like to lose your main source of writing inspiration? I understand that is what may have tipped you over the edge.
To be honest, it wasn't too good for my cause, but I still knew I could find other inspirations out there. And to answer your second question, I think you need to get your facts straight on when I allegedly lost my marbles.
I understand, and I'm sorry that I speculated. So what happened after the show was cancelled?
Well, I thought I would just wait until either my bosses told me of a new writing opportunity or to clean out my desk. It was the former that ultimately happened, with my boss approaching me with the chance of a lifetime in the television industry, to create my own TV show and be the head writer. I was so taken aback by this that I think I can remember giving him a hug. I cleared my head and then asked him what I'm sure is a pretty common question. Can I star in it? My boss gave me a look, and I was inclined to believe that it wouldn't be the wisest idea for me to be the main face of the show, given my appearance. I was pleasantly surprised after I had received a response that the show would be airing in that September, and that I would be the star. The format and the premise was figured out over the next week, and when that concluded, I began writing the first episode.
Yes, Casey Weber had it made. Funny how the world works, isn't it? I can recall being a little girl back then, waiting anxiously for that day's episode of Casey's Corner to come on. I, like many other people that watched the show, was so naive, unable to comprehend just what kind of monster was before the camera each week. I asked Casey more details about the earlier episode, how the location was chosen, the stories, and here's what he said. So tell me more about the early shows. Why would your show be set in a diner?
Well, it's kind of a funny story. Back when I was writing personally, I would sit in the diner that the show was set in, as I could smoke and drink coffee in the peace of a corner booth. So naturally, when the location subject came up, I suggested the diner for the sake of nostalgia.
That's really neat, how something that was a source of happiness for you before came back into the picture to continue on that happiness.
Absolutely. We all need to keep the happy moments alive in our heads, or else we go crazy.
Yes, that's so true. Now, how did the premise come to be about the storytime aspect?
In the beginning, as a writer, I knew that the concept of sharing a story that happened to someone, usually one based in humor, was very popular. If it had been entirely up to me, there would have been no message of advice in any of the stories, but sometimes you need to sacrifice some things to please others, so everything went on without a hitch.
Something I find intriguing is how the children tie into this. Were any of the situations based on ideas or experience that the children had?
Funny you should ask that. It actually happened by accident. One of the local children we had cast for the second episode was quite chatty, and told us a story that had happened to his father when he was young. With that, I realized that what he had told me was a godsend. In the 2 days between the casting and taping of the episode, I completely rewrote that child's segment to be about his father, after getting the proper consent, of course. When the episode aired, we received a lot of positive feedback on that section of the episode, and then we knew the show was going to be a hit if we continued following that formula.
After the break, we'll look deeper into where things took on a more sinister turn in Season 2 of Casey's Corner. Stay tuned for more Private Eyes with Donna Talbot. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in now, we are speaking to the former star and creator of the hit television series from the mid-80s, Casey's Corner. The remaining episodes of the first season continued to increase in popularity, and so, naturally, the show was renewed for a second season in September 1986. I personally began watching the show around the 10th episode of the first season, and I know, like many others, that the show was the best thing to come along since sliced bread. A personal memory of mine, and I'm sure one shared by many others, is when the show took on a darker turn in the fall finale of the second season. A quick side note, this broadcast will be available on our website along with a few excerpts from Casey's Corner itself, including the most talked about episodes. The final 5 episodes aired in the fall of 1986 and early 1987. Now back to the interview. I'm hesitant to ask this again, but what happened before the fall finale aired that changed the show so much?
Well, that's a complicated question. I'm well aware that there's a blog about what's happened on the internet, and I know for a fact that you read it and even did a phone interview regarding one of your experiences, so I know you already know the answer to that.
Yes, I am well aware of that, but you need to tell the viewers about it, for the record.
Well, if it's for the record, then by all means. I began cheating on my wife around the last few episodes of The Littlest Hobo, and the affair continued on until just before the fall finale was aired. My wife caught me, and feeling rightly betrayed, she took our son and left me. I was wholly rattled by this, and descended into a spiral of disturbances. Memories of my childhood began flooding back, and I remember a particular event that happened when I was about 7. My best friend and mother lost their lives as a result of this event, and in my manic state, I decided to angrily write an episode telling what happened to me. I threw a monkey wrench into the taping schedule with that one, by requesting that the episode be aired live, with no real rehearsal.
So what I'm ultimately gathering from this is that if your wife hadn't left you, all of the subsequent mess regarding what followed in the final episodes of the second season could have been avoided?
Yes.
Do you have anything you want to add to that answer?
Not right now.
We'll be right back with more after these messages. I want to give a warning to those watching this at home. The footage that will be shown after this break is very disturbing and may not be suitable for young viewers.
Why did I kill my son? Well, I didn't kill him per se. He had an accident. As for your other question, about the first episode after the fall finale, more stuff went wrong over the period, and so I wrote another episode based on something that happened to me in childhood.
That is more from my earlier interview with Casey Weber, convicted murderer on death row. Let's watch more. I have a rather personal question for you concerning me. Why did you stalk and try to kidnap me all those years ago? I don't even know why I'm asking this. I guess I just want some sort of closure.
I knew that you watched my show, and I had the idea to cast you in an episode back before everything went wrong. I was just following you for research purposes, to see what your life was like, as I was running a bit low on ideas. As for why I tried to kidnap you, it was all for the purposes of a story, and nothing more sinister than that.
That's such a weak answer coming from such a creative person. There is no excuse for following me and trying to kidnap me. I need a moment. Sorry for that. I shouldn't have pressed the issue, and now, back to the interview. Excuse me for that. Now I have a question for you about something else that happened in 1987, when you kidnapped and murdered Don Jenkins. Tell me about that day.
I'd love to. Don, his friend, and a friend of Don's used to watch my show religiously, and I decided to start following all of them to get some ideas for my show. Something happened when I was watching them watch the fall finale, though, and that changed my whole MO. I had a feeling that Don and his brother were beginning to suspect that something was wrong, and as I watched them through the bushes, I moved a bit and disturbed the leaves on one bush. I caught the oldest one catch a glimpse of me, and I knew he knew something was definitely off. Later that night, after the friend had gone home, I waited until Don and his brother went to sleep, and then I struck. I didn't feel any guilt for the commission of this crime, just relief that someone who would have been able to identify me was now unable to. I gave up on following Don's friend after that, and decided to finish off the season in peace.
Let's talk about the initial arrest following the final episode. Were you at all surprised to have been caught?
No, not really. I was surprised that the police were able to make the connections between my personal writing works and unsolved crimes in the area.
What was your time in Willowbrook Mental Asylum like?
Well, being locked in a padded room for 24 hours a day certainly gives you lots of time to think. I was thinking about who was responsible for reporting what I had done, and then I finally got the answer. It was Don's brother. It had to have been, or maybe even the friend. I decided to write them each a letter to let them know what happened to Don, and what would happen to them following their betrayal of me. If I'm not mistaken, that's the letter that was posted to the friend James's blog about the show.
I think we need to take a break for a moment.
I'm not finished yet. What are you so uncomfortable for? Is it because you're sitting across from some crazy criminal? Is it because I nearly kidnapped you once and taunted you about it last year, before I was arrested? Does it bother you that we're sitting across from each other with no boundaries in place, and I have ample opportunity to lean over and put my hands around your neck?
Welcome back. My sincerest apologies for the break there. The interview was getting a little too out of hand, and in order to continue, the police needed to restrain Casey somehow. Are you ready to continue, Casey?
Yes, I want to finish this so I can enjoy my time prior to my execution in peace.
I just have one question left for you. If you had a chance to do everything all over again, would you change anything?
No. In the end, I think that in every situation anyone has gone through, no one would really change anything, despite some claimants saying they would.
That's all for today's episode of Private Eyes. If you would like to learn more about the Casey Weber case, please visit our website, where you can find a link to the blog post from James Corning, various other interviews about the subject, original footage from the questionable final episodes of Casey's Corner, and much more. Coming up next, local news, and be sure to tune into that, as live footage of Casey Weber's execution will be broadcast. For Private Eyes, I'm Donna Talbot.